I sat down with Noah Smith 2 weeks ago to dive into the broader changes the Democrats need to make to regain economic credibility, resonate with the US voter base, and attract tech leaders. Let's dive in.
Hey Noah, good to see you, bud.
Hey man, good to see you.
Thanks for coming to my party this past weekend. That was fun.
Absolutely. All the Econ 102 listeners need to know that Erik Torenberg can rap. He can act, moreover, he can freestyle rap, which is very impressive. All right, spill the beans. How many of those rhymes did you workshop in advance?
So freestyle rap is the only rap I know how to do. I can't actually write raps. It's a very different skill. And the reason I know how to freestyle rap is because, and I'll get to your question, is because in college I got really into it. I even started a company that was like Zoom for freestyle rap, basically. And I have just freestyled for, thousands of hours. And basically what happens when you freestyle a lot is you build an internal rhyme dictionary in your head. It's kind of like when I understand it, like if you play guitar, you learn scales, like patterns that you keep coming back to when you improvise. And similarly, like this conversation we're having right now is the first conversation we've had like this, but because we speak all the time, we're freestyling, but we've used these words before, if that makes sense. And so similarly, when I freestyle, every time that I do it, it's like a new thing, but I've used those rhymes in different ways in the past. So basically the way it works is when I know that I'm about to freestyle, what I'll do is I'll think like 2 or 3 punchlines that I know I wanna get to. Like, I know I wanna call out these different people. I knew I wanted to say, "Finally becomes a man," and then I'll fill in the rest live, if that makes sense. So it'll be like setup, 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 and those are just improvised, and then punchline. And so the punchline I'll have in advance, if that makes sense.
Got it. So it's stand-up comedy. That's how
Yeah,
stand-up comedy works.
yeah.
That's great. Have you ever done stand-up?
I did stand up once just to try. I even hosted an event called Everyone Stands Up. It was like an open mic. In order to come, you had to perform. So everyone was kind of like a beginner, performing for the first time. We were all terrible. I did it once. It was really fun and awesome. And I just have so much respect for people who do it at a high level because it's just so hard. Have you done it?
No, I've never done it. I just always thought, I'm not a funny person.
No, you're pretty funny.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm funny. I mean, I can make myself laugh, but then I don't think I can make other people laugh very much.
Well, a lot of people are funny like spontaneously or in conversation, but it's harder to be funny like just with a mic and here's a joke. You make me laugh, funny man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I was actually thinking of doing it just for fun, just to try a challenge.
Oh, you should. Well, I'm sure Econ 102 listeners would want to hear that.
Yeah, I don't want to do every single Jewish stereotype in my entire life. I've already done physics, worked in the media, economics, been a finance professor. I've pretty much other than being a lawyer or a doctor, I've done everything that doesn't take like 10 years of work to do.
Well, yeah, you have to fill the prophecy. Um,
Anyway, but for those who are listening, there Eric's party where he did freestyle rap was a bar mitzvah themed, Jewish themed dance party. So it was very, yes, entertaining and silly.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. Cool, man. Well, let's get into it. You wrote a few good posts over the past 10 days that in different ways kind of got at, what is the future for the Democrats, right? You wrote about sort of reactions to neoliberalism criticisms. You wrote about, briefly you touched on sort of the abundance movement with Derek and Ezra's book coming out. And then most recently, and we maybe start here, you wrote about sort of, maybe one path for the future of Democrat Party is going back to 1992 or thinking about the liberalism of that era. And you outline 3 recommendations that you have for today's Democrats. Why don't you unpack those?
Oh, so the recommendations basically, Trump is making some mistakes. Trump and Musk are making some mistakes. I mean, they wouldn't put them as mistakes, but they are. Democrats can capitalize on these. We're already starting to see Trump go underwater in his approval ratings on the economy because people just, they said, oh, Biden caused inflation. People don't understand where inflation comes from, but we have a decent understanding of where it actually comes from. And we elected a guy who was much worse on inflation than Biden. Like Biden renominated Powell to raise interest rates. Biden cut deficits like a bit, not as much as he should have, but he did a bit. And then those are kind of the two things you can do. Also, Biden opened up oil drilling and a bunch of other stuff that Trump will also do, to be fair. But I think that, certainly higher interest rates via the Fed and slightly lower deficits were two of the things that restrained inflation in America and meant that we had inflation that fell from the post-pandemic period faster than countries in Europe and elsewhere. And so that was, a big win for Biden, but people still associated him with that, the year and a half or 2 years of heavy inflation. And so they thought, Trump's different, throw the bums out, we'll get these guys in here, Trump will beat inflation. No one has any idea how that's supposed to happen. And the truth is that many of the things that Trump wants to do or is going to do are inflationary. So tariffs are the obvious one. Tariffs raise prices. Jawboning the Fed to try to lower interest rates, if that actually works, that will be inflationary in the extreme. And then also Trump wants to basically increase deficits with tax cuts, and more tax cuts, which far outweigh any of the spending cuts than that they'll be able to do, or that they even want to do, or the Doge will do. Certainly, like Doge is tiny. And so that's inflationary too. So basically everything Trump is doing is inflationary. And if you look at inflation expectations, they're ticking back up as people realize that Trump is actually just an inflationary kind of guy. That makes sense because in Trump's businesses, his business has always benefited from what? Low interest rates, like profligate spending and things like that. He's just doing what he knows how to do. And he's an old guy. He's not going to turn over a new leaf. And there's no, there are fewer people restraining him this time. So now inflation expectations are going back up, and inflation itself has ticked up a little bit. It remains to be seen if that's a blip, but short term, and we've seen an acceleration of inflation. But then expectations are the real thing. So we did see an acceleration of inflation, like a brief acceleration of inflation at the beginning of 2024, like a very small one. But we didn't see expectations go up, and people thought this is a blip. People are not thinking this is a blip now. So anyway, point being, people are still upset about inflation. That the memory of that post-pandemic inflation hasn't gone away, and people still feel squeezed by the drops in real wages and real incomes that happened over that time period. And so Trump is going to make those things worse, and Democrats can stop that. The problem is that Democrats' ideas for controlling inflation during the Biden years. So it's interesting dichotomy. What Biden actually did to control inflation was good and successful. But what Democrats talked about and progressives talked about in terms of controlling inflation was batshit nuts. All right. They talked about price controls, which are stupid and will make things worse. They talked about just subsidizing consumer expenses, which is stupid and will obviously make things worse. And then they talked about industrial policy, which is good, but will not reduce inflation because actually the demand for materials and labor for like factory construction will actually increase inflation in the short term. So none of the progressive stuff is actually anti-inflationary. And so, I mean, maybe antitrust, if you really did it seriously over like 10 years, would have like a small effect, but like it's not going to be big. And so Democrats need to not talk about that silly stuff because people know that price controls are bad, and people know that, if you say I'm going to subsidize this and that, like people intuitively think, oh, that's going to push up prices because people are not totally ignorant of supply and demand. And so Democrats need to not do that. They need to just say, we're going to get rid of inflation. And then if they get in power, what they need to actually do is just allow the Fed to raise interest rates as necessary, cut deficits and things like that. So cutting deficits is important. It's what Bill Clinton did in the 90s. And so Dems can do it. I've seen them do it, right? Arguably, Obama, although he had big deficits in, the first year, then was kind of a hawk later on. He cleaned up most of those deficits later on. And so Democrats have been fiscally responsible and sort of deficit hawks in the past. I'm sure they can do it again. They just have to get over this idea that we've become, socialists. That we're going to be socialists and we're going to like spend a ton and spending doesn't matter and deficits don't matter and blah 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 blah. Like stop that. The MMT and like soft MMT bullshit, Shaikat Chakrabarty stuff. He lives down the street from us, and we should get him on the podcast sometime. But he's full of crap on this and on some other things. But then he really good engineer though. But utterly full of crap on macroeconomic stuff, and just thinks that like spending doesn't matter, deficits don't matter, blah blah, and will usher in like a golden age of central planning that will make everything cheap. No, that will not happen. And so Democrats need to not do that. They need to go back to the successful approach of Clinton and then maybe like Obama after the Tea Party. And so that's the first thing. Number two, otherwise they will not be able to capitalize as easily on Trump's inflationary crap. So number two is democracy. So Trump and Musk are certainly threatening democracy in some ways. So, Musk is saying 60 Minutes should go to prison for quote unquote lying. Like, yeah, now you should go to prison for lying? Like, really? And so then, the DC prosecutor is like sending people, is like trying to prosecute Democrats for like saying stuff. And Trump tried to overturn an election, deny that votes were real. Do you really think he won't do that again? Like, and so there obviously is a threat to democracy. The problem is that Democrats have not been in a good position to use that as an issue. In fact, defending democracy failed as an issue for Democrats. And we don't know why, but Americans do care about it. But why were Democrats unable to harness this? For a couple of reasons. Number one, when Democrats talked about what was threatening democracy, they talked about a bunch of like long-term stuff that doesn't threaten democracy at all, such as gerrymandering and voter ID laws. Those are like, gerrymandering is as old as the Republic, and it's less bad now than it used to be in many ways. And then, of course, there's no hard and fast definition of when gerrymandering is bad, but by like, misapportionment of Congress, it's gone down. And so, we weren't saying gerrymandering is destroying democracy in like 1996, where we know we were not. But people were gerrymandering the hell out of stuff. I think gerrymandering reached a peak in like the 2000s. Anyway, voter ID laws are fine. Canada has them, Netherlands has them, France has them. It's fine. 99.7% of people bring their picture ID to vote. Voter ID laws do nothing. Everyone already obeys the voter ID law. And yet Democrats were going around saying that voter ID laws were this giant threat to democracy. No, they're not, bro. They're not. And so, like, because Democrats misidentified the threat was simple denial of elections. The threat is election denial. And Democrats, for some reason, avoided talking about the thing that Trump had just done, and instead talked about these like long-term hobby horses that aren't that actually important, because all the like activists like Mark Elias wanted to focus on those instead, because those are their favorite things to focus on. And so Dems became an unreliable defender of democracy. And the most precious and annoying little thing that Democrats would do is say that voter ID laws and gerrymandering threatened multiracial democracy. Like, is there another kind? Are we not a multiracial democracy? I believe we are. I mean, if we had laws that stop black people from voting, as we did long, long ago, maybe no. You could say we're not a multiracial democracy, but we're a multiracial democracy, bro. And so, like, but they're like, these laws like that Canada and Netherlands and France have are threatening multiracial democracy. No one gives a fuck about your like new neologism and whatever. So that was badly done, poorly done. And I do think Trump's attempted coup sort of provoked a backlash in 2022, where you saw Trump-aligned candidates did worse than other Republicans. By 2024, everyone forgot about that and no longer cared. The election denial penalty was gone by 2024. So if Democrats want to stand up for democracy, they've got to focus in on the actual threat instead of just like a whole bunch of hobby horses, whatever. Besides that, Democrats are focusing on the hobby horses because they have this thing in the back of their mind that they are the party of the masses. And if we just allowed more poor people to vote, they would stampede to the polls and vote for the Dems, who are the party of the poor people. No, they vote for Trump. Higher turnout means more MAGA. The poor people are on the side of MAGA. It's the elite educated professionals, who are on the side of the progressives, and so the side of the Democrats. And so there's like reams of evidence on this. And basically,
Why is that?
education polarization. And I don't know why that's true. Like, I have theories, but basically it's that smart people, educated people now tend to be Democrats, while, just like regular normie folks tend to be Republicans now. And so when you get more normie folks to vote, you get more Republicans, and the Republicans win. And so, like, Democrats have not internalized this. They still think it's like the 1970s and they're the party of the poor. No.
Well, it seems like both parties haven't internalized it, right? Like Republicans
Maybe.
are Republicans trying to increase voter turnout?
Yes. Elon is pouring money into turnout increasing things. Yeah. Elon, not dumb. The Republicans, yeah, Elon has been a game changer in making the Republicans effective and not dumb anymore. Like, so now we have only one effective party that can get anything done, because they have one effective man who can get anything done, because America has only apparently one guy who can get anything done, and his name's Elon Musk. One man can get things done in America. No one else can. Like, I don't know, maybe Palmer Luckey will get things done. We'll have two.
Because the left was saying, where's our left Joe Rogan? Are they saying, where's our left Elon Musk? Maybe they get Sam Altman, increase the feud between Sam and Elon.
Yeah. Your left Elon Musk was like actual Elon Musk if you had just like sucked up to him more in like 2010 or something, instead of being like, oh, you fucking tech bro, suck it, Tesla. No. Good move, guys. The guy was a green tech entrepreneur who was like a Democratic supporter. Like, he was a center lefty kind of Dem, and then just got negatively polarized. And I don't know, maybe he had some personal stuff that happened, and like older people get more conservative, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that's really true, that he could have been kept as a Democrat. But the point is that Democrats have not thought about the Democrats absolutely underrate the power of these effective entrepreneurs and individuals. When I wrote that post about Musk being incredibly effective and powerful, like these, like, you know, Henry Farrell, the political scientist, wrote me. He was really angry. He wrote these like long, angry rants at me about how actually Musk is incompetent and he can only succeed because of government help. Like, you're living in a fantasy world. No one else could have done what he's done. And so you put Henry Farrell in charge of all of this, or anyone that Henry Farrell knows, and they will absolutely fail given 10 times, 100 times the resources Musk actually had at his disposal. They would fail to do that. And Henry Farrell just obstinately refused to understand the skill of a class that's his class rival. As the shabby intellectual academics fail to recognize the talents of the entrepreneurs. Tale as old as time, but now it's having, because of education polarization, it's having actual political consequences.
But if you were Democrats, what do you think about the idea of going to someone like Sam Altman and being like, hey, what Elon is doing for the Republican Party, we want someone to do to the Democrat Party? Like, would you, we'll give you the keys to the kingdom, whatever.
Maybe. I don't know about Sam Altman specifically, but I think they should just any tech-friendly entrepreneurial types, any Democrat-friendly tech entrepreneurial types, I mean, they should get on their side. Sure, Sam Altman, if he's willing to do it. I don't actually know if Sam Altman is. I don't know if he's a Dem at all. But like, I don't know, like, who's like a prominent, like, I guess like Benioff, the Salesforce guy, I guess.
Reid Hoffman, Mark Cuban.
Yeah, Reid Hoffman. There's like Dem-aligned people, maybe Altman. Like, and then I don't think any of them has the capabilities of Musk, but I think that altogether you could get a lot of good ones. And then, but yet, when you just get Democratic politicians yelling like tech bro this, tech bro that, like, are you stupid? That's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes, you're stupid. You are stupid. Democrats have just brainwormed themselves into thinking the entrepreneurial class does not have important talent. They have brainworm. It's a stupid brainworm. It is, just, it is dumb. It's counterfactual. It is, it's not fucking real, man, as the guy said in Wolf of Wall Street. And this is just poisoning. It's an unforced error that's alienating important base of support. Everyone who listens to this podcast already agrees with me. Applause line. What we need like a little applause sound effect where we just imagine a whole bunch of like, 26-year-old venture capital associates listening to this podcast and being like, yeah, tech. but it's true. It's true. The Democrats have screwed themselves with this shit. And then like you talk to people in the media and they just say, the tech bros just want us to suck them off all day and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, pucker up.
Exactly. Well, adjacent.
Are you dumb?
That's a cold open. That's a good, like,
shit, we're gonna get sued or something. I canceled somehow. Like, that was so bad. Okay, what can I do to top that? Anyway, the liberal Rogan is just me. Is just making like really bad sex jokes.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with Netsuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/zen. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/zen. netsuite.com/zen. So it's a new year, 2025. And one of the recurring questions I've already been receiving is, should I start my own business? Can I do it all on my own? Now more than ever, my answer is a resounding yes, with tools like today's sponsor, Shopify. It's never been easier to start pursuing your dreams. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. No coding or design skills required. They also help with the details like shipping, taxes, payments, and have social media tools that connect all your channels and create shoppable posts, allowing you to focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. What happens if you don't act now? Will you regret it? What if someone beats you to the idea? Don't kick yourself when you hear this again in a year because you didn't do anything now. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/momentofzen, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/momentofzen to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/momentofzen.
Or maybe I'll be the next like Howard Stern. That was the actual liberal Joe Rogan was Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Back when like talking about sex made you a lib.
Yeah.
Now talking about sex makes you a conservative.
Right. Yeah. Maybe who's ever in power likes to enforce, more strict rules. Maybe it's irrelevant.
God forbid people would have sex in this place. Anyway, so we need to do another relationship episode, by the way, where we need to do that where we get Zoomers on and like make fun of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
By the way, this has to happen.
Yes.
But anyway, back to Democrats. So the third thing Democrats need to do, by the way, is just abandon a lot of the progressive baggage of the 2010s and early 2020s. The main thing that needs to be abandoned is an idea. It is Ibram Kendi's idea that America needs to be refounded, that America is an inherently racist entity that needs to be effectively refounded along quote unquote anti-racist lines. And of course, when people say anti-racist, they mean it in the sense of like antimatter versus matter, like matter of the opposite charge that, somehow is supposed to cancel out matter. They imagine anti-racism as a opposite sign racism that cancels out the racism instead of just yet more racism on top of it. Like, so anyway, the idea that like America's true founding was 1619 and, we were stamped from the beginning, and then the founders, actually rebelled against Britain because they wanted to keep slaves and all this dumb shit. Like, historians will debunk it, except that then younger historians will scream at them online. So they're afraid to debunk it, even though they know it's a lie. All that stuff out the window. Goodbye. DEI program's already dying everywhere. It's like, you don't need to get up and make speeches like DEI sucks, we're going to get rid of it, because people don't even know what it is. People who know what it is are getting rid of it. And Trump's getting rid of it. So that's not important. You need to talk about America in a patriotic way, talk about freedom and our hallowed values from the Declaration of Independence on down to right? Just talk about all that stuff. Kamala started going that direction. It was good. It was too little, too late. You need to do that for 10 years. Or at least 4 years, maybe not just like 3 weeks, right? And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that the strongest thing Democrats can do to convince the average person that they're not trying to like become totalitarians is stop language policing. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say, another reason that Democrats have been less than credible on free speech stuff is that some Democrats have gone against free speech. So Tim Walz said that the First Amendment doesn't apply to misinformation and hate speech. Well, yes, motherfucker, it does. You're wrong. The First Amendment protects hate speech and it protects misinformation. You can get up there and lie and say people suck all you want. I can be like, I'm going to nuke Australia. Australians suck. They genocided the rabbits with myxomatosis. They're a bunch of like horrible people. And I'm just going to nuke them. And you know what? That's protected by the First Amendment. Sorry, Aussies, you can't come after me. And then misinformation, I can be like, I am going to take no opinion public, funding secured. And then like, no, I mean, like, I guess the SEC can sort of come after me for that. But like, in general, misinformation, I can be like rabbits, man. They've got superpowers. They can like, you can ride on their backs and they can like jump into the stratosphere. Like, you can't come after me for that. It's First Amendment right, man. I can lie. And Elon, in fact, called me a liar the other day. It was like, someone was like, Elon is a liar, an idiot, huckster, all these insults. I was like, well, he's a liar. He talks a bunch of shit on social media, but like, he's not those other things. And Elon was like, no, fuck you. You're a liar, bro. And then I was just like, Elon Musk responded to my tweet. Oh my God. That was like my initial reaction. I was like, wow.
The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
It's apathy. That's right. That's exactly right. But anyway, but yeah, like, So Tim Walz should have not said that. That was a totalitarian thing to say. He shouldn't have said that. In fact, saying that was actually worse than anything Elon Musk has said or done. That's worse than saying 60 Minutes should go to prison, because what Tim Walz would say is establish a principle where anyone that they would accuse of misinformation or hate speech would go to prison. That's insane. And you saw some state-level Democrats introducing bills to criminalize hate speech. You saw John Kerry said, we would love to crush misinformation, if only for that pesky First Amendment. We can't do that, guys. And that was less extreme than what Tim Walz said, but it was still a really bad look, right? And so Democrats were not a credible defender of free speech, but they need to be credible on this. They need to go back, return to actual liberalism. The whole authoritarian progressivism, just out the window, in the trash, in the garbage disposal, launch it into the sun. Anyway, I love the idea that launching things into the sun comes from an obscure movie, Superman 4, that people don't remember for any other reason other than at one point Superman rounds up all the nuclear missiles in the world and throws them physically into the sun.
Oh, interesting. I never saw it.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I think that's where that comes from, because it always gets a reference. Anyway, but no one remembers anything else in that movie because it's otherwise terrible. But okay, so anyway, Dems need to stop with the language games. No more birthing persons. All right? None of that. Do not use any, to whatever degree possible. I know language does have drift, but to whatever degree possible, do not use any expressions that Bill Clinton would not have used in 1992. Do not tell people how to talk. It doesn't even matter if the language change is a reasonable and good one. I don't care. It's a freaking language change. It's not as important as substantive things such as winning elections, getting Trump out of power, things like that. Stop it with the freaking language games. There was a recent state level bill, to change mothers to inseminated persons. There's actually a good reason for it, because I don't know, gay couples, you don't know with lesbian couples, you don't know who's the mother. Right? When you don't have one person who gets marked down as the mother, so you don't know who to apply the law to. There actually was a reasonable. Don't do it. We dealt with lesbian couples just fine 3 years ago. We dealt with it just fine. Lesbian couples had no problem with registering their whatever. Language. Stop all the language games, even the ones that might be a tiny bit useful. Stop them all, 100% right now. Stop the language games. And this will signal to America that you are not totalitarian speech thought policers who just want to control everything you say.
Hey, we'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. In an age of AI and big data, your personal information has become one of the most valuable commodities. Data brokers are the silent players in this new economy, building detailed profiles of your digital life and selling them to the highest bidder. With data breaches happening frequently, these profiles aren't just fueling spam. They're enabling identity theft and putting your financial security at risk. But what if there's a way you could opt out of that system entirely? Incogni is a service that ensures your personal data remains private and secure. They handle everything from sending removal requests to managing any pushback from data brokers. What I trust most about Incogni is how it provides ongoing protection. Once you're set up, it continuously monitors and ensures your information stays off the market. Want to extend that peace of mind to your loved ones? Incogni's Family and Friends plan lets you protect up to 4 additional people under one subscription. Take control of your digital privacy today. Visit incogni.com/moment and try it risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code MOMENT at the link below and get 60% off your annual plan. Again, that's incogni.com/moment. Hey everyone, Erik here. In this environment, founders need to become profitable faster and do more with smaller teams, especially when it comes to engineering. That's why Sean Lanahan started Squad, a specialized global talent firm for top engineers that will seamlessly integrate with your org. Squad offers rigorously vetted top 1% talent that will actually work hard for you every day. Their engineers work in your time zone, follow your processes, and use your tools. Squad has front-end engineers excelling in TypeScript, React, and Next.js ready to onboard to your team today. For backend, Squad engineers are experts at Node.js, Python, Java, and a range of other languages and frameworks. While it may cost more than the freelancer on Upwork billing you for 40 hours, but working only 2, Squad offers premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost, without the headache of assessing for skills and culture fit. Squad takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Visit ChewSquad.com and mention turpentine to skip the waitlist.
I wonder if the Sister Soldier moment for the Democrat might be saying, hey, we should probably drop the trans issue from our platform. Not that it's not important, but that it's a losing issue. Or and by issue, I mean,
I don't know about that. I don't know. I mean, like, I think that they should probably do that, but I don't think that necessarily saying that. I mean, like, so you saw AOC got rid of pronouns in her bio.
right, right.
It'll just be like that. It'll be just memory hold this stuff. And as for trans issues, like, it's fine to, like, oppose, like, some of the state level bills that just, like, regulate which bathroom you're allowed to use or something like that. Because, like, no one criminalized bathroom use in 1995, and yet no one was complaining about it either, right? Like, no one complained about trans people using whatever bathroom they wanted, in 1995. And so criminalizing bathroom use is pointless. And so Democrats can oppose that. But basically, if you talk to trans people who aren't involved in the activist movement, which is a small slice, I mean, trans people are a tiny population, and then trans people involved in the movement are a tiny population of that. And so if you talk to trans people who are not involved in the movement, they'll be like, actually, guys, before this movement, trans people had it pretty good in America. Like, yeah, there was discrimination and people thought, oh, it's weird, whatever. But, like, in terms of legal stuff, you could just legally do a sex change, be treated as the opposite sex, and, like, people, no one calls Deirdre McCloskey Donald except for, like, some right-wing assholes. People won't misgender you, people won't dead name you, people won't misgender you. And then, and if they did, they're just kind of a jerk, stop it, like, we accepted trans people in a way that now, like, due to backlash against the trans movement, we don't. And so this is not a case like, gays who never had full rights in America, or black people who never had full rights in America, et cetera, or women who never had full rights in America. This is a case where trans people had pretty much every right you can think of, except maybe for, like, a few, like, puberty blockers or something like that. But that's like a medical issue. Like, maybe doctors would start to prescribe. That's not a right. It's not a legally guaranteed right. It's just like a medical thing. Anyway, so it's not a civil the trans movement was not a civil rights movement. It was a representation acceptance movement. It was a cultural movement to use pronouns, to think of gender in a different way, blah blah blah. That was different than the gay rights movement. It was different than the women's rights and, movement, and civil rights movement, and, et cetera, et cetera. Different than all those movements. And so, I think it backfired because of that. Americans want to give full and equal rights to people, but movements that force people to change culture and language and how they talk, and, like, how, all this stuff, birthing persons and whatever, Americans like, no. And so I think that just quietly dropping a lot of that stuff would be useful. For the Sister Soldier moment has to be about America itself. It's got to be a patriotic thing where someone says America was founded on racism, and then some Democratic politician gets up and says, no, it isn't. It was founded on freedom. Done. That's it. That's the Sister Soldier moment we need. We need someone to explicitly say America was not founded on racism, it was founded on freedom.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, that's a better one. Yeah. The related conversation, I'm curious to get your perspective on this. So Derek Thompson, who we should have on the show at some point, about his book and about the
Reading it now, 2/3 of the way through.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, you're one of the abundance thinkers as well. So yeah, we should have him on the podcast. But he had a tweet the other week where he's basically like, "Hey, why are young people shifting to the right?" And if I summarize, he was basically saying during COVID, a lot of young men and women were in highly gendered social media spaces, where youngest men in particular seem to have significantly more anti-feminists and become open to right-wing influencers and parties. And my perspective is that maybe doesn't give enough shrift to how certain people were alienated by some of this language that you're talking about. Like you sort of think,
Probably.
yeah. And so I think Democrats need to learn the right lessons, right?
Yeah. I saw an interesting hypothesis by Claire Lehman.
Oh, from Quillette. Yeah, what'd you say?
She said that now it's interesting. All the intellectual dark web people are actually most of them are putting their money where their mouth is by becoming anti-Trump. They are turning on Trump. They were considered just like, oh, you're just conservatives in liberals' clothing, but nope, actually now they're against Trump. So I'm proud of those guys. Go intellectual dark web.
And who's it? Sam Harris, Claire Lehman, like
Yeah, and the Kathy Young, and, like, a lot of these people, the Free Press, and you know, welcome to the resistance, guys. I always wanted to start a second blog called the Intellectual Dork Weeb.
that, that's good.
Oh yeah, she said that young people aren't forming long-term relationships as much. And this means that they don't de-radicalize each other. Men and women don't have to come to an accommodation about politics because you know, they don't have to come to accommodation about anything. And I think this has to be our relationships episode. We have to talk about the rise of situationships. Situationships are the emotional version of what Gen Xers called friends with benefits. Gen Xers were just so goddamn horny that like when they couldn't find someone that they really liked, they just find people to just like have lots of sex with just to like, you know, get rid of some of the horniness. And that was Gen X, the horniest generation alive. Maybe I guess the boomers sort of equaled them, but then we've passed that where people have relationships where they don't have a ton of sex, but instead they keep someone around for like some of the emotional components of the relationship without actually committing to that person, or like, trying to make it without calling them their boyfriend or girlfriend, or like, just saying we're in a situationship, and they're getting like, it's like friends with benefits for the emotional component of a relationship.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's creepy as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Kids, you're bad. This is the part of getting old that I always look forward to. I always look forward to yelling at kids and saying you're bad. Because like if you're young and you say young people are bad, it's like, you know, it's like a internal fight. It's not as fun, right? It's like, now I can be old. I can be like, you kids, you suck. Back in my day, people had meaningless casual sex and they liked it. That like, you guys with your situationships, what do you know? Like, anyway, that's what I want. I just want to make fun of like young people things.
That's funny. The Okay, I want to return back. So yeah, we'll definitely have that episode. I want to return back to your three recommendations and just get deeper on a couple points. And it's funny. Sometimes I'll get some comments on these shows saying, "Hey, Eric, pushes back too much." Sometimes I'll get comments saying Eric doesn't push back enough.
Push back all the time. I want more. I'm gonna overrule the people who say Eric pushes back too much.
Great. So yeah, I'm just going to be trying to be as good faith as I can. Well, also when you talk about Biden on people say that people misunderstand. Like you made this piece about where you commented on Furman's sort of critiques of neoliberalism, and basically you say people take the wrong lessons from the sort of Biden economic era. I want to hear you unpack that, but I also want to hear you address kind of the sort of inflation reduction plan or build back better, kind of this part of the Biden era as well.
Right. So this was calling the Inflation Reduction Act the Inflation Reduction Act was two things. Number one, it was a sop to Joe Manchin. Number two, it was a hoax because it wasn't an Inflation Reduction Act. When you build a bunch of factories, that increases demand. You're increasing demand for labor and materials and land and all these things, and that pushes up prices in the short run. Maybe 10 years down the road when you're producing more stuff, then it will decrease prices by a equivalent degree or even more. But it's certainly not an inflation fighting measure in the short term. So if people expected the Inflation Reduction Act to increase inflation, they were wrong. So it was a mislabeled thing. That said, the Inflation Reduction Act was actually good because it made us build more batteries, which is what we need if we're going to counter China and seize control of the physical technologies of the future, and basically like win the future instead of just abdicating the future to China. It's what we need to do. Build batteries. Like, what goes in a drone, man? A battery. What is the dominant battlefield weapon of the modern age? A drone. Like, we need to build batteries. It has nothing to do with reducing inflation. So we needed to do it. It was good bill. There were some healthcare subsidies in there that were not good. But the main thing of just subsidizing like basically battery manufacturing directly and indirectly, that was good. We needed to do that, and we did it. It did not reduce inflation. The economic lessons of the Biden administration, Biden did defeat inflation mostly. And how did he do it? Number one, the Fed raised interest rates. Biden reappointed someone to the Fed who would raise interest rates. That was the biggest thing. Number two, there's two other things. Biden did cut the deficit somewhat after the COVID spending, let all the COVID spending expire. I mean, the Republicans had a hand in that too. So credit to all congressional Republicans. And then the other thing Biden did was he opened up a whole lot of oil drilling. And it just surged more than in Trump's first term, although Trump may exceed it in his second term, but more than Trump's first term. He opened up oil drilling, and we had this record oil boom and became the top oil producing nation by far in the world under Biden. We became the Saudi Arabia of oil. The Saudi Arabia now wishes they were the United States of oil. And so we fracked, we drilled, we did, drill baby drill. Biden did it. And so that probably reduced inflation a bit as well. So those are the three things Biden did to reduce inflation. It was effective. I mean, some things were just inflation coming down its own, like, the end of the oil price shock from the Ukraine war, but we did help bring oil prices down. So, like, there were some other factors too, but then I think Biden did a lot. Our lesson from the Biden administration is that that stuff works. That's effective. We know how to beat inflation. We just have to do it.
What about as it relates to debt? We talk a lot about cutting deficits. What about growing our way out of it? Or which is to say, is there a world in which Trump's more business-friendly policies will lead to, and maybe combined with some AI luck, will lead to tremendous growth that could help us grow our way out of that? And is that a strategy worth
Oh,
pursuing?
maybe. Well, maybe growth. Yeah, but that I don't know. Like, I think that some things Trump does will be anti-growth. Like a lot of the stuff that Doge might, hamper in the federal government is necessary for businesses to invest. Like businesses want certainty. They want stability. And if Trump is inflationary, that will hurt growth because that will eventually cause stagflation, eventually, because instead of running the economy hot, what you're actually just doing is convincing people you're irresponsible. And irresponsible government is not a thing. If you're thinking of like, should I build a new factory? Should I build a new office? Should I invest in this fleet of trucks? And you think, well, I don't know what the hell this crazy Trump guy is going to be doing in, 5 months, 2 years, whatever, then you won't do it. You'll hold off. You'll wait and see. And then investment goes down. And then, so if inflation goes up at the same time that investment goes down, then you get stagflation. So I'm not optimistic about that. I am optimistic about deregulation. I think that there's been a general recognition among Republicans that deregulation is a big deal and that they need to do it. What's interesting is that this never happened before. Carter deregulated more than Reagan, and Clinton deregulated more than Bush. Democrats were the deregulators. Republicans just cut taxes. And Republicans would appoint people who were sort of hostile to the idea of regulation, hostile to federal action. They would appoint sort of like soft on corporates people under Reagan and Bush, right? They would do that, and under Trump the first time. They would do that, but then they wouldn't actually cut the actual regulations. And I think now Republicans finally woke up and realized, no, we have to actually change the laws. We have to cut the actual regulations.
Why did Democrats become the party of more regulation?
Well, I mean, Democrats, people thought they were the party of more regulation in the old days, although they weren't really. It was a joint Democratic Republican effort. But then Democrats became the party of land use restrictions because it combines a seeming environmentalism, the aspect of environmentalism, with educated professionals getting to preserve their nice views and quiet streets.
Yeah, interesting.
The people with the sign in their yard of like, one sign says, "In this house we believe, blah blah blah. Science is real, love is love, dirt to hurt, Black Lives Matter." And then in the other sign is like, "No apartment buildings near us." And so like that was another reason. No factories, no apartment buildings, no anything except my little village, my little rich liberal village with my Pete's coffee. That was it.
Got it. Let's get to the democracy part of the argument because where I totally understand when people talk about sort of threats to democracy, they sometimes mean different things. To me, the most obvious threat is the one you mentioned before around election, trying to overturn elections. And so when people talk about preserving democracy, they talk about sort of free and fair elections where there's a peaceful, transfer of power. And I concede, or I certainly agree that, and agree that Trump's sort of, 2020 trying to find the votes or sort of whatever he did there was very bad. And if he were to repeat it or anyone to repeat it, it's a huge threat to what we got going on. So I agree with that. What I don't understand fully yet, but maybe you can help, or I want to hear the best argument for it, is why is Doge a threat to democracy?
Why is Doge a threat to democracy? So Doge, the threat to democracy is if it's not really from Doge itself. It's if you have executive orders that tell Trump to tell Doge to stop doing this, and then Trump disobeys that and provokes a constitutional crisis, which so far he's backed off from. Trump is like, we'll obey the courts. But if you basically say court orders don't matter, I'm just doing it anyway, how many divisions has the Pope, as Stalin famously said? If you do that, then you're in trouble. Then democracy's in trouble because if we elect a king instead of a president, then we have democracy in trouble. And so that's the danger from Doge. I would say that otherwise, I would say Doge is more of a danger to just efficient running of the government. It's actually a danger to government efficiency.
Well, it seems like when people talk about threats to democracy, sometimes they mean different things. Is sort of what's being threatened the will of the people, i.e., the people voted for a thing, and then it's unable to be sort of implemented? Or is democracy, when we refer to democracy, we're not referring to this, the will of the people, we're referring to this like checks and balances, system.
Well, I mean, if you elect Congress, that's democracy, right? And Congress controls spending. If you elect Congress and you send your representatives to say spend this much money on U.S. aid, and then Trump's like, nope. Yes, you elected the president, but like, the electoral will of the people is expressed through Congress is being frustrated. So I'd like, how can you say that, if you don't have a like the Senate still existed in the Roman Empire, right? It was just a rubber stamp for the emperor. The reason we think that this changed, that the Roman Republic fell and the Roman Empire began, is not because you stopped having a Senate. You kept having a Senate. It's just their powers became ceremonial. And if our Congress has ceremonial powers, we don't really live in a democracy anymore. If the president is just a king. But then, yeah, like election denial is the main threat to electoral democracy. But if you can't, yeah, like I think, we're a long way from Congress being utterly toothless and powerless. Like Trump would have to do a lot more than he's done in order to make that happen. Also, so I would say that if with the courts, it's less democracy than the rule of law. Rule of law is another important thing we don't equate that with democracy. That's why we have the phrase democracy and the rule of law. So that's not redundant.
And so the mistake that you think Musk is making with Doge is for what we talk about, is like the baby with the bathwater, just too much, too quick. But like in theory, you agree with the premise, but just not the execution, or how?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. They're allowing themselves to be motivated by like memes and like right-wing information ecosystem, like bullshit memes, whose purpose was never the uncovering of actual truth. That stuff's not information. So like if Elon, like I said, the most effective man in America, if he wants to figure out how the rockets work, he'll go ask engineers and then he'll read about it himself, right? But with the government, it looks like there's a lot of stuff where they fire people and then they have to hire them back the next day because they didn't realize what they did. Or like they'll fire people who do some like important thing and then just decide the thing isn't important because right-wing meme ecosystem said it wasn't. And so basically, Elon doesn't seem to be making the government work the same way he'd make one of his companies work. And I think one reason for that is that the goal of a company is clear, make money. Whereas the goal of a government is not clear. Like, do you actually think our government should be saving a bunch of people in Africa from AIDS? Well, one point of view is no. Screw those people, America first. Another point of view is, okay, well, if you get, like a lot of the people who get AIDS are kids, then you get higher infant mortality. Higher infant mortality translates to much higher fertility, and then Africa's fertility is already going down, but part of that is because kids aren't dying anymore. A big part of that is that kids aren't dying anymore in Africa. Infant mortality went down. You send it back up, you get a population explosion. You get wars. You get people showing up at the southern border from Africa who went up through the, Mexico, trying to get in at the southern border. You get African people overstaying their visas to get away from the war. And then you just get a ton of the sort of disorderly immigration that these guys hate. And so like down the road, we actually lose out from an Africa with more AIDS. And so like PEPFAR was incredibly effective. So you can take the idea of like, no, let's save like a couple $1 million by just not treating AIDS for African people. Or you can say, actually, down the road, it would be better to have an Africa with a more stable population. So think a bit. But the problem is that like what the goal isn't clear. And so that makes it less possible. Also, the organization's a lot bigger. So Elon Musk has to delegate more. It's bigger than SpaceX, bigger than Tesla by like orders of magnitude. Like look at the number of employees. But like, so I think Musk, even Musk's legendary ability to like go in and do everything himself, like is stymied by the sheer size of the federal government. So he's got to delegate to people who like don't necessarily know what the hell they're doing. And so normally Elon would just come in and fix it. If you want something done, you've got to do it yourself. He'd come in and fix it. Now he can't. And so, but I think that also it's that Elon's idea of what ought to be done here is coming from a bunch of like shouters on X. And that, the actual like smart people who know the value of PEPFAR, not just like, wow, we would like people not to get AIDS. AIDS is bad. We'd like to save lives. Like not just those people, but the people who actually are foresighted thinkers are like, okay, if we do PEPFAR, then, in 20 years, we get fewer like refugees showing up at our shores, and who can see that chain of events. You know, I don't think those people are in the right-wing media ecosystem that Elon is getting his information from.
Yeah, to me, it seems plausible that Cat Turd is probably not the most knowledgeable, about PEPFAR.
Yeah, have you seen Cat Turd versus Cat Turd?
No, I haven't seen
He just flips what he says every week.
it. That's funny.
It's just like he says the exact opposite thing. Cat Turd is a pure Trump apparatchik. He'll just say whatever bullshit is necessary to just absolutely justify whatever Trump is doing today and demonize anyone who criticizes whatever Trump is doing today. And then tomorrow, we had those guys in communism, right? Who would be like, no matter what the communist government did, you'd have apparatchiks who'd say like, this is what we were always doing, and like who just contradict themselves flagrantly like the next day. You'd have these apparatchiks, and Cat Turd is a pure apparatchik. And if Elon Musk is getting information from Cat Turd, he's poisoning his own ecosystem, right? In a company, Elon would go talk to the engineers who know how shit works. And that's how every smart manager of technical companies does it. That's how Richard Feynman found out what caused the Challenger explosion. He just asked the engineers. They're like, "Oh, it's the O-ring, dude." No one else did that. Crazy, right? But Elon just does that all the time at his companies. He gets information on the ground. Now he might fire the engineers or fire bad engineers or like whatever. He might ask them one question, get an answer, and then fire them because that's all they needed to do for him. He might be ruthless in that way, but he gets information from the ground level. And in government, the people with the information, the engineers, are the policy wonks. Elon's not, I don't think, is getting his information from the policy wonks. I think he's getting his information from like right-wing influencers on X. Those are not the engineers. But I think he's suspicious that the policy wonks are woke.
Yeah. Well, he's got his team now in Doge that I'm sure he's getting information from, but they're new to government.
It's going to take them a decade to get up to speed on where the policy wonks are today. So like Elon needs to go to the government engineers who are policy wonks. Go to the people at the Manhattan Institute, right? There are conservative policy wonks out there. There's AEI, there's the Manhattan Institute, there's Heritage Foundation. These guys know things. Libs hate them, but they know things. And Elon should be going to those people and asking them what's going on, how does this work, how does that work? And he's not, I don't think he's doing it.
Right. Right. Let's close on economics. So would you be excited about a return to neoliberalism, or because there's been sort of this anti-neoliberalism, but you also wrote about anti-neoliberalism, or what's the right way to think about sort of the right economic paradigm, or is some hybrid?
Oh, I think we need a new thing that is neither neoliberalism nor the, just knee-jerk reaction to it. We need a secret third thing, which is address the challenges of the modern day. We need industrial policy for national security reasons and because our clustering effect is being weakened by the rise of Asia. That's the other reason I don't write about much, the second reason. But it is a reason we need industrial policy. And so, but then we also need industrial policy for national security reasons. We need to do that, right? We need deregulatory approaches, especially land use deregulation, but also some other stuff, deregulatory approaches that we've shied away from using before. That's not clear you can call deregulation neoliberalism, right? But then in some sense, like the as Matt Iglesias pointed out, the sort of land use thing where everyone gets a veto, land use photocracy was sort of part of the neoliberal push, actually, because the neoliberal push is like local control. It's not free markets, it's not full private sector control, but it's local control. We need more government involvement. We actually need a bigger bureaucracy to override the land use NIMBYs. And that's one thing that Elon should think about. Bigger bureaucracy is better in terms of getting things done in terms of land use, and Japan shows how this works. Basically, Doge people need to be paying attention to how Japan does bureaucracy. Because in Japan, the bureaucracy is conservative, right? A whole lot of Doge is like an ideological project. They want to get wokeness out of there. Well, if you want to get wokeness out of there, go to the Japanese bureaucracy model. And they're not doing that. But they need to do that. A bigger, but also a better bureaucracy. That is a more conservative bureaucracy because of the way they hire. So Japan hires people who spend a couple of years in the bureaucracy and then get placed in the private sector. So it's young people who want to go into the private sector. It's the Luke Ferritor types, right? That's who goes into the Japanese bureaucracy. Like in Japan, Luke Ferritor would go into work in the Japanese bureaucracy for 2 years and then go like work at some company and do like engineering shit. But he'd be recruited for the bureaucracy because of natural talent, right? And so recruit people with natural talent who want to go into the private sector after spending a couple of years figuring out the bureaucracy. And that's who's in the Japanese bureaucracy. It's full of conservatives. It's a very conservative place. And so Doge needs to know that, actually. So I want to write a proposal for them to actually move our bureaucracy toward this model, but I don't think they listen to me because I'm like a lib.
Well, it's funny, Michael Lai has been talking about, our good friend has been talking about this idea of sort of Doge for the left, and maybe it'd be fun to brainstorm and maybe this is what Abundance is trying to get at, or sort of, just a much more effective, you know, left wing sort of efficiency program.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely needs to happen. Now that's another thing on top of what I was just going to say.
Well, shall we wrap on that, or is there anything?
That's good. What are your thoughts on all this? Like, don't listen to the haters. Tell me more. Give me more, Eric.
I'm I'm at the highest level. I'm excited about more accountability and transparency, and sort of like, I think we should know where our dollars are going. And I mean, in general, I like how Elon runs companies in terms of his sort of, like, yes, there's chaos, but there is, I think X is a good example, right? There is, he overturned a lot of the, like 80% or something of the staff, sort of lab. He made it a much more efficient run place. There was a lot of waste. They had a massive staff, and the product hadn't like changed in 10 years. Not to simplify, too crudely, but I think directly.
I don't think the point of buying X was to make money. I think it was to be a platform for other things. I think that it is profitable still. It's still profitable, but it is much smaller, and I think the valuation of it has shrunk. I mean, I think there might be synergies with XAI where you can harvest tweets to make Grok better.
My opinion is that it had dual role. It's a dual. I mean, I agree that he had other goals with it too, but also, he did raise a lot of money. Andreessen and Sequoia, put billions of dollars, and that's not charity for them. They're hoping to make money on it. They're very serious people, and I don't think Elon would have brought them in if he didn't have aspirations to make it a profitable venture too. That's my opinion. Obviously, I'm not in Elon's head, but I think Twitter has been a mess, but I think, or X, but I think it's a better run place now for that mess, and that's my hope with Doge. I mean, I think it's like in the beginning with remember in the beginning with Twitter how everyone was so scared of, like, man, Elon's really fucking up the product, like everything, like even people on his
I
side.
think that was true. It's much worse.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's really bad now.
right. It was certainly truer.
I mean, it was always bad.
But in the beginning, there was, and Elon was making all these mistakes, right, with the free speech thing, and it was always like, remember, like, he cut people off, and he was doing like daily polls, like, should I step down as, he did one, should I step down as CEO? And then people voted yes or something, and he didn't do it, or well, I guess he kind of did it.
The biggest mistake was link deprecation, external link deprecation. That mistake has not been corrected, and is one reason people are leaving. I mean, like, X is just a political shouting bag. It's just like a whole bunch of people screaming at each other over politics. It always had that, and that was always the worst part of it. But before, it also had videos of large chickens, scientists discussing science, jokes. Now it's just politics, 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 anger, 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 and you see people are abandoning the platform. Like young people don't use this platform anymore.
Right. Well, I agree that's happening.
They all went to TikTok,
Maybe and Blue Sky and other and Threads.
not Blue Sky, but TikTok.
Right, right. I'm excited about a pluralistic social media ecosystem.
I am too. And that's why I'm happy that Elon bought Twitter and turned it into X, because I actually want to make it a narrower, smaller thing. The platform itself sucks more, but the ecosystem itself is better, even with stupid TikTok, because it's more fragmented, and we don't have just one room where all the Americans are trapped with each other in this sort of like no exit kind of hell, as we did in the 2010s. We were able to spread out again to have more room. And so, while I think that what Elon has done has not been good for the product, it's been good for America because that product was bad for America.
I I I still think it's possible it would be good for the product. I agree that there has been some.
Well, I hope not. I don't want to see X become like the discussion platform for all of America about everything the way Twitter used to be. I don't want that.
It's not gonna do that, but what I wonder is if it will better monetize what it has now with either
Oh, maybe better.
subscription or some sort of other tool.
I hope they make as much possible money while, you know, taking as little as possible of the nation's attention and time.
Yeah,
I hope they just turn into an LLM company.
yeah. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and what I hope also, similarly, is that, like, I hope for a smarter Democrat Party. Like, I think Elon has made, with what you said earlier, the Republicans smarter, and I hope for, like, a similar response on the left, and I think, like, tech ignoring, you'd say, hey, does tech have too much power or whatever in politics? But like tech has ignored or not gotten involved in politics in the last 10 years to the degree that it is now in terms of like serving in government, that being high status for the Luke Feirders of the world. And I'm excited about a world where it is, where both talented people on the left and the right are like, you know what, I'm going to kind of what you were talking about Japan. So I generally like directionally excited. Are there big concerns? Yes. There are things that flare up, but it's sort of like, never bet against America, never bet against Elon or not never, but you're usually going to lose that bet or something. And so, I'm directionally positive, but I, it's always it's always high variance with Elon, right? It's always, at the verge of chaos. On that note, as always, a great discussion. Until next time.
It was fun. Until next time.
Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at ericaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.